All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. It is Thanksgiving week. We have so much to be thankful for, except the fact that I have COVID, but we'll get to that in a minute. I am not thankful for that. But on the other side of the glass, just like last week, we are thankful for that he's here, is David Gautieri. David, good to have you, bud. How are you doing? Much better than me, I know that.
I'm doing a little bit better than you, Bob. I'm not doing so well myself. It's not COVID related, I will
Yeah.
say that, but man, my Ravens, we can't seem to get a W right now. There is good news though. It looks like J.K. Dobbins might be free. Dobby might be free.
I
So
hope so.
we'll see. We'll see. Unfortunately, of course, 2020 can't have anything nice, so we're not going to get to find out this week because
Yeah,
like you, he caught the COVID as well. So,
yeah,
or at
yeah.
least he ended up on the COVID list. He won't be playing against Pittsburgh.
I was nowhere near there. So back to my original statement. So last week, if you remember, we did our show on Thursday. I had driven to Chicago and back for a short business trip. Had to go there, went there, spent like not even 4 or 5 hours at this work we're looking at. I drove back, nothing special. I didn't go to any restaurants. I did drive through everything. Just drove back, stayed at a hotel. That was it. But if you remember Thursday night, my throat was getting pretty rough, and I made sure I didn't talk as much. And Saturday, I was sick as a dog, had the flu, nothing different, nothing, same typical flu-like symptoms, little fever, some chills, some aches, some pains, some, whatever. Fought through it. By Sunday evening, I was getting back to normal. Worked yesterday, worked today, and but I figured I needed a test just because well, family might be coming to town this weekend, my mom, that kind of stuff. So I went and got tested today, rapid test, and it was positive. So there we go. So now I get locked in the house, locked down for the next well, it's 10 days from the point of the symptoms, so that was last Friday. So I got another week and a half to stay at home. So lots of fantasy football that we'll be excited about. I can continue to do all kinds of fun stuff like that. But enough of my problems. Let's get to the problems of football, which we have out there. Unless you own at the quarterback position. Well, before we get to that, David, as always, let's start off with your article of the week. Your waiver wire ads based on consistency. Why don't you talk about that being up, and maybe throw out a nugget that comes out of that article and where they can find it.
Yeah, it's getting tougher and tougher writing a waiver
I'll
wire
bet.
article with each passing week. I mean, it's really, really drying up out there. So I think the theme really it's becoming to clear out the bench and to focus on upside, and to not look so much for consistent performers because there's none of them left out there. It's to
Right.
be looking for guys who have that potential to become consistent performers and who you would be able to insert into the lineup with confidence if the circumstances were to allow it and they were to step into a starting position. Guys like Jalen Hurts, who you don't need me to tell you about the upside of rushing quarterbacks. We saw it with
Right.
Taysom Hill
Sure.
this past week, threw for 223 yards, I believe, zero passing touchdowns. He finished as the QB3 of the week, I believe, or going into last night's game, he was QB3.
Right.
So Jalen Hurts, we know he can run the ball. We saw it in college. He rushed for over 1,200 yards and 20 touchdowns just as a senior at Oklahoma. He ran a 4.59 40 at the combine. So he's willing, he's able, he's equipped with all the athleticism in the world for a quarterback. And Carson Wentz is just playing bad football. He's
Yeah.
just not playing good football right now. He's turning the ball over. He has more games with two interceptions thrown this year than games without. He's thrown two interceptions in 6 out of 10 games this year. 2 games with one interception and 2 games with none. But
Yeah.
60% of the games he's thrown multiple interceptions. They're 3 and 6 and 1. If they don't get it done against Seattle this week, I mean, mid-game, if they're not getting it done, I don't
Yeah.
see how
Right.
you don't insert Jalen Hurts into the game and you continue to allow Carson Wentz to turn the ball over and this team to lose.
Yeah. Like you said, it. I watched that game. He played the Browns this week, so obviously I was paying attention to that when I was watching here at home, and I saw that screen pass he threw to Miles Sanders. I mean, it's just like, gosh, I could have ran to Cleveland and caught that ball and took it into the end zone from an hour away where I live. It was such a give me for Tacky Tacky to take that to the house. But yeah, he's just not looking good out there. I totally agree. And the numbers reflected. I mean, we look at him this year, he's 16th in total points, which is, terrible. He's only 40% consistent, just not good. But then again, Lamar Jackson's also 40% consistent. You're a Ravens fan. Talk to me, bud. I got him in some of my leagues, especially ones that I'm like barely a game and a half out of the playoffs. It's not pretty. I didn't even think I had a shot, but I just need him to do things. And it's a touchdown only league, so I need him to score touchdowns and mostly rushing, preferably. What's not working in Baltimore? Is it the line? Is it the lack of running game? Is it COVID? Is it the fact that they left Cleveland many, many years ago? What is it all about?
Man, there's a lot of things going on. If you could point to one issue in Baltimore and say it's this, it would have been solved by now.
Right.
It would have been figured out. There's a lot going on here. It starts with the lack of talent at wide receiver, for one.
But they didn't have it last year.
They didn't have it last year, but they were schemed a little bit better last year, and the play calling was better. And we had consistent playmakers in the running game that we could rely on. Mark Ingram was a feature of the offense. So we featured Mark Ingram as a runner. He didn't have a super high amount of carries, but he had more than any single running back's been getting this year. This year, we have not given any runner a chance to get into a rhythm at any point. Anytime any of these guys have started to heat up, we throw another back into the mix. And finally, I mean, we've been pounding the table. The fans have been screaming from the sidelines all year for J.K. Dobbins to be featured. It was clear. Right. Every time this guy touches the ball, he makes a play.
And that was the amazing thing. Week 1, this kid scores 2 touchdowns. Looks like he's a second coming of Adrian Peterson. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Ingram's done. And it's like they just couldn't bench him, whether it's the veteran leadership or whatever. So maybe, like you said, maybe that's it. Last year they had to go with Ingram because Ingram was the man and he looked good. And when you get those consistent carries and you're part of the flow, and then it comes to you naturally. But when you start, okay, yeah, you were good that series, but we got to get Dobbins sometime. We got to get Gus Edwards sometime. We got to get this guy sometime. Maybe is that what's screwing things up? Is they're trying to make everybody happy like it's a freaking little league team? I mean, that's what I just don't understand. It's like there isn't much different from last year. The pieces parts were pretty much the same, other than adding Dobbins. Did they screw around with the chemistry and the flow too much?
You know what I believe as a Ravens fan is that it has a lot to do with this coaching staff and the fact that John Harbaugh has won a Super Bowl already. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. And it was Baltimore and Kansas City. They both looked at this year coming out of the gate slow, like they were taking it easy, like they almost don't take the regular season seriously. Like they thought they were just gonna they already have a playoff spot locked up. Why would we need to feature J.K. Dobbins? Why would we need to run the tires off this young kid when we have a veteran like Mark Ingram? And the problem is we haven't been winning games and we're teetering on the edge of a playoff spot. Right. And that pride and that hubris, it needs to go because we need to win games. And I think they started to realize that as it started to get in. We saw it last week. They realized we got to start winning games, and it's time to stop messing around. So I'm praying and I'm hoping Dobbins going to miss Pittsburgh, but he comes back against Dallas, and then it's Cleveland, Jacksonville, New York Giants for the rest of the fantasy playoffs. So it should be wheels up from there. And if it ain't, then I'm not going to be a happy camper. I'll tell you how much.
Yeah, and also throw Cleveland in there.
Yeah.
But it's at Cleveland. Yeah, I think that always can be interesting. All right. Also, let's just look down the list here. We've already talked about the big boys are still just clicking. No changes there at the top of the list. Middle of the pack, we're seeing some Kirk Cousins every once in a while not doing too bad.
That was the name that stood out to me when I was
All right, then I'll let you go from there.
Well, I don't really have much of a pitch or anything, or a buy, sell, hold,
Right.
whatever. I don't have any suggestion what to do with him. It's just surprising to
Yeah.
see him with these names, to see it go Deshaun Watson, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins. And he did this last year too. He started really slow. He played really, really poorly, especially from a fantasy perspective
Mm-hmm.
through the first month of the season. But then he started to pick it up a little bit, and all the other, weapons started to perform a little bit better. And you just look at the stat sheet. He didn't throw more than 27 attempts through the first 4 weeks. Then now he's been up 39, 36. One game of 14, 20, 36, 30. So the passing attempts have been up. He's thrown 3 passing touchdowns in 4 separate games, all since week 3. And the interceptions have been completely erased. 1 interception in the past 4 games, as opposed to, you look at the first 6 weeks, he threw 1, 3, 2, 0, 1, 3 interceptions. So he's just playing clean football. They're moving the ball, they're holding the ball longer. It's good news. Hopefully he
Right.
can keep it up. The playoff schedules, it doesn't look too good. They got Tampa, Chicago, New Orleans. So we'll see how it
Yeah,
pans
it's
out. I'm
rough.
sure.
Right.
Sure, the old. That's why I don't want to make any suggestions out there.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just
You don't want to
more
be
of a,
like trading away,
yeah. But
Deshaun
he is
Watson for
playing
him. But
well right now. He is playing
right.
well. So you have to give credit where credit is due.
Right, right. And it could be the schedule. He certainly played some high powered teams like Seattle, high powered offense, terrible defense. Uh,
Atlanta,
Atlanta, same. So
Detroit.
those kind of games. So
But he
yeah, when
played
they get
well
in,
against Chicago. So that's where it kind of makes you question about how well maybe he is playing well.
right. Yeah.
'Cause he threw
Especially those
292,
interdivision
2
games. So
touchdowns. Yeah.
yeah.
And they won that game against Chicago. And that was
Right.
a big game for them.
Right. Um, I guess the
Definitely
other
looks like he'll be back next year in 2021, though. It looks like they're going to be committed to him for at least
yeah.
another year at this
Yeah.
point.
At this point, I mean, they don't have they. I wouldn't be surprised if you see him draft somebody in the draft that might be a future guy, but yeah, I mean, at some point he's going to have to be moving on, onward and upward. Um, I guess the other guy, Tom Brady, seventh in total points, only 55% consistency. Again, kind of has his moments. He has these great games and these bad games, and he's just kind of been up and down. When he's good, he's very good. When he's bad, yeah, he's pretty bad. So, what are your thoughts as he moves forward towards these fantasy playoffs? Decent schedule. I mean, he's got a bye in week 13. That's always hurts, especially if you're in a league where the playoffs start in week 13, which I am in some of those. But he does have, Kansas City this week. That should be, I think, a good shootout. Then he's got Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, and Atlanta. That's week 17. But still, nice little schedule going into the playoffs. What are your thoughts on Mr. Brady moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to tell. It's been a roller coaster ride. He's up, he's down, he's in between. But you're right. I mean, it's tough if you play in one of those leagues with week 13 playoffs. That's brutal. I would never want to play in one of those leagues. He's got to buy week 13. So,
Yeah,
and
well,
I think
yeah,
didn't you?
go ahead.
Isn't the Scott Fish Bowl like that too? I think a lot of
Yes,
people were saying they passed on McCaffrey for
yes,
Saquon this year because of that, because of the
right.
week 13 bye.
Yeah, Scott Fish Bowl is definitely one of the big ones like that. I
Then I
think
would
like
want to play in a league with this because I would want to play in the Scott Fish Bowl. I wouldn't prefer it though. If you can start a league, don't do week
Yeah, I
13,
think a
please.
lot
The
of the
rest of
big
us are begging
national
you.
contests are that way because what they do is everybody plays everybody once, so then you play, basically, week 12 weeks.
What was
Uh,
it, 4 week playoff?
yeah, and then well, actually, what they do is there's a 2 week playoff. Wait a minute, there's a yeah week 12 you're done, and then no, I think you're done. You play everybody once, so that would be 11 games, right? Yeah, that's 11 games. So yeah, so then the playoffs. If what happens is if you are the one of the top 2 teams in your division, then you play or top 4 teams in the division. Two play well, like 4 plays 1, 2 plays 3 for semifinals. Then the league championship for your league is week 13. Then, if you are one of those two teams, then go into a super match, a super contest for weeks 14, 15, and 16 to win like the $500,000.
Oh,
So
there's
that's
a
how it works.
prize too, huh?
Yeah. So basically, how it works is for the expensive leagues is like if you win your
Half a
league, you win
mil.
1,500. You win fifteen
Jeez.
hundred bucks because you pay 350 to get in. So if you win your league, you win 1,500 or maybe
If
it's
I
12.
won $500,000 playing fantasy football,
Yeah,
oh Lord.
nice. And then you go into the super contest to win the big money. I've made that I think twice.
What would be the first thing you'd buy?
First thing I'd buy, wow. Now, first thing I would
Put
do,
you on the spot.
first thing I would do is pay off my kids' college debt. Then
So what would you do
I
with the other
probably would,
12
I
bucks?
probably wouldn't buy anything, to be honest with you. I probably would put it into my IRA so I could retire in 10 years like I want to, or maybe retire a few years earlier. Um, I don't think I'd go out. I'm not a,
That's boring. That's a boring answer.
I
Wow.
know it is a boring answer, but see, I'm 57, you're 25, right? So there's a big difference. If I was your age, I'd be buying myself a Tesla or some kind of badass sports car.
No,
Um,
I don't think I would. I don't think I would get anything material like that. I would quit my job and I would invest in myself and try and go full time doing this.
there you go.
Try and put it into my site and put it into
Mhm.
building the brand.
There you go. Yeah. And I'd probably donate a ton of money too. That's kind of how I am. All right, so let's move on to the unless you got any more on the quarterback side.
No, there's not too much more to cover down there. I don't
Okay.
think.
All right, let's go to the running backs. Who's some of the guys on your list or on your in your head this week as you looked at the consistency reports through week 11, week 10, week what have we? Yeah, week 11. Week 11 and anybody in there that just kind of stuck out at you?
Um, well, there's some names I could talk about. DeAndre Swift, who I love, and I'm hoping we get back against Houston. But
Mhm.
I was looking at how Cleveland has two backs who have 67%
Mhm.
plus consistency rating, with Chubb at 4 out of 6, and then Kareem Hunt is 7 out of 10, 70%. But
Mhm.
another sneaky one that stands out to me: Miami Dolphins.
Mhm.
Miles Gaskin at 5 for 7, 71%, and then Salvan Ahmed at 2 for 3, 67% for him. And
Mhm.
Ahmed basically, the first game shouldn't even count because we didn't know we were getting. No one was starting him that first game. I don't
Right,
think the
sure.
Miami Dolphins coaching staff even knew what they had. But after that first game, they cut Jordan Howard, and he's been good the past 2 weeks when people were actually starting him. So I would call that 2 for 2 for Ahmed.
Yeah,
So
yeah, good point.
this has been a consistent backfield it hasn't had a lot of boom weeks, but
Mhm.
they have been very consistent in producing running back points on a weekly basis. So
Right.
it's something to keep in mind this year, something to keep in mind next year as well. We're gonna have to see, there could be a lot of movements and wide receivers added to that team, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the running backs they bring in, because this is probably going to be a backfield that we're going to want to target again next year.
Right. I was gonna say, if you want to kind of go with that scheme, let's talk about the Arizona duo of Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, 60 and 67%, 17th and 20th total points. Certainly some of it has been injury related where, they've had to kind of fill in for each other, but really nice combo there as well. I think Arizona kind of sees how Cleveland did it last year with Hunt and Chubb, and they're obviously doing it this year. Would be better numbers if it wasn't for some of the injuries to Chubb. But I think teams are starting to see that this is something that if you've got two solid backs, you can use them in some kind of not necessarily committee because sometimes they're both on the field, but just be able to interchange them and stay fresh and keep fresh legs out there while the defense is starting to wear down. So definitely a good call there.
I want to talk about them just for a second too,
Okay.
because I was all over Kenyon Drake this offseason. Luckily, I pared back a little bit when he was in the walking boot right before the
Right.
season, so I didn't end up with too many shares. But he's bounced back, and he's not. We kind of wanted to leave him for dead because we all overspent on him in drafts this year. But they've played well together the past 2 weeks, Edmonds and Kenyon Drake. It hasn't
Hmm.
been one coming at the expense of the other, really. And the thing for Kenyon Drake that it's good to see is he had 5 targets 4 receptions this past week against Seattle, 4 for 31 receiving. He hasn't had more than 2 targets in any game all year, and he had 5 this past week. So they're finally switching it up and making it not so predictable, and that's going to be good for the offense just in general. When you don't know Kenyon Drake's going to run the ball when he comes into the game, and hopefully they can continue to coexist, Drake and Edmonds, especially if they get them both the ball as receivers.
Right. Zeke, excuse me, Zeke finally had a bounce back, which was nice. Any thoughts on Zeke moving forward?
I have to check the schedule. I mean, I don't really know to be honest, I don't know if my thoughts on Zeke are relevant. Like, if you have Zeke, it's past the trade deadline, right? So he's stuck on your roster pretty much in basically every league. The only question is whether you bench him each week, and that's a week-to-week question right now, right? Like, do you play him against Washington? He didn't do well against Washington at all. The whole team didn't play well against Washington in Week 7. 12 for 45, no touchdowns, 1 for 6 fantasy points. It wasn't good. So you can sit Zeke this week. Hopefully this offense is in better shape. He has Baltimore the week after. That's not thrilling, but Baltimore's run defense has been lacking the past 2 weeks, especially with Brandon Williams out and Calais Campbell out. So it's not as scary as a matchup as it used to. But then he's got Cincinnati week 14. So there's some good news if you have Zeke. There's some light at the end of the tunnel. Or halfway towards the end of the tunnel. If you can get past week 14 with him, find something else after that. San Fran, though, week 15, Philadelphia, week 16. Those aren't terrifying matchups either. So
Right.
It's good if you held out and didn't sell low on Zeke,
Yeah, I mean, I had him in a few leagues, and one of them was Kings Classic, and I left him in, so I got the win. I'm up to 5-6, so I've got a slim shot at getting into the playoffs. There, I need everybody ahead of me to lose and me to win, but there's still some hope, but it's getting dimmer by the day. So
I think the conversation with Zeke, though, just to finish up on that note, is it needs to be that Tony Pollard is still a mustache in redraft leagues because the offense has bounced back a little bit. And Pollard, I believe I included him in the column as well, him and Cam Akers. Right. Those are the kind of guys who, if they actually were getting a full workload, you would slot them into your fantasy lineup, no question about it. So Zeke is performing again. Tony Pollard had a touchdown this past week. He needs to be owned because if Zeke misses a game, Pollard, he could be a league winner.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those that's pretty tough. So I'm looking at the division that I am 5-6, and yes, there is 4 teams ahead of me at 6-5, 4 teams ahead of that at 7-4. So I'm 2 games out, so of that second place. So I mean, I only got to make the top 6. Like I said, I need some wins this week to get through. I don't even see. Let's see. I'll look at the schedule here. See how. Where is the schedule? Oh, there it is. See if I play any of these guys ahead of me.
Hey, Bob, there's always a chance until it's a 0% chance.
Exactly.
We've learned that by watching the Falcons many times this year.
Oh, so here's the sad part. I got to play my buddy, our buddy Kobe Conway, who writes for the site, and then Dom. So I don't think those two are. Is Kobe ahead of me? No, he's not. Dom is. So never know. I mean, the good thing is then hopefully some of these other teams are playing each other. They knock each other out. Yeah, we have a shot. I've made the playoffs the last couple of years in at least one of the leagues each year. So kind of always my goal to make the playoffs. So anyway, all right. So let's move on to the wide receiver position. And, just like I said, it's been a very solid year for wide receivers. If there's one thing that I feel like really there aren't too many big receivers have let us down this year. I mean, Julio Jones is only 63%, but he's been semi-injured, and that hasn't been great. I mean, outside of that, maybe DJ Moore has been kind of a letdown. He was certainly a top 15 wide receiver pick. Odell Beckham, I gave up on him. I didn't pick him in any league anyway.
Michael Thomas, but that was injury.
Michael Thomas is injured. I never beat down somebody for an injury. Yeah. I give him a benefit of the doubt. But it's really more from underperformance, whether it's the player, whether it's the team around him, and in DJ Moore's case, it's kind of a little bit of both.
Cooper Kupp was in that conversation until last
Right.
night's game against Tampa Bay. He had another good game against Miami a couple weeks ago, but he had a really slow start to the season.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean he's up to 16th now, total points, 70%. So he's back in there. If he puts even a nice end of the season, he could easily get up to the 80%, and that's what we want. We just want him to be there. I was on a podcast last night with the Fantasy Typhoon out there on Twitter, so make sure you follow him. Good guy. We were talking about the wide receivers, and I said, here's why I know that this is 2020 and it's not a typical year. It's not a standard year. Two reasons. Number one, Amari Cooper is at 80% consistency.
I was just looking at that too.
Never has happened in his career has he been over 65%. He's currently at 80. But I think
that says something, even missing Dak half of those games.
Yeah, and right, exactly. But here's the one that to me, I haven't looked this up, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in the book of Revelations that the end of the world is coming when Will Fuller plays all 16 games in one season. And right now, he's on pace. So if you haven't been to church lately, you've got about 5 more weeks. Get there. Save your soul, because Will Fuller hasn't got hurt yet. If he does get hurt, all bets are off. All right, so we got some time. Every week I keep waiting for this to happen because I didn't draft him. I hate drafting him. I've drafted him. I've been burned too many times. This guy's got it. He showed a little consistency at the end of the last, end of this year, that year, whatever year. Yeah, pick him up. He's had these big games every year. Looks like he'll be hot for a while. Gets hurt, miss half the season. So like I said, that's why I know this 2020 is just completely off the charts when Will Fuller is when Amari Cooper is actually consistent and Will Fuller is actually not hurt. That it's been a weird year. And they have. Some other guys up there that I've always been a fan of Keenan Allen. Always been one of my very consistent guys I draft every year.
Number 3 right now.
Yeah, doesn't always get a lot of love. But this year is unbelievable. And why? Justin Herbert. I mean, nobody, I was even a little concerned with Tyrod Taylor going, but he's the only guy they got. They'll have to throw it to him. He'll still get 10 catches for 50 yards, but he'll get 10 catches for 50 yards, gets his 15 points. But with Herbert, I mean, they're spreading the ball around. He's getting balls, he's getting yards, he's getting touchdowns, he's getting all of this. So, yeah, when I saw the third in total points, like, holy cow, what a year. And he's not a young chicken anymore either. So that's even more amazing. So really, putting it together nicely. A.J. Brown's really had a nice comeback. He started off very slow beginning of the year with Tannehill. He's coming around.
I want to jump in there because I was looking at the other Tennessee wide receiver, and he was the guy right above Keenan Allen, Corey Davis. He's been more consistent than A.J. Brown. 6 for 8 for A.J. Brown. Corey Davis, 7 for 8. 7 for 8. And he had that one dud, and it was a complete dud. I think it was a bagel, an offer.
Yeah.
And it was like everybody just gave up on all of the momentum and the optimism that we had gained from him.
Well,
and it's crazy how much people want to write him off again just because of having been burned before. And it's like,
right. So I'm thinking about creating a new award. So every year I do the consistency awards. At the end of the year, who's the most consistent, who's the surprise player, blah, blah, blah. I think I'm going to create a new award this year just for wide receivers, and I'm going to call it the Devontae Parker Memorial Award. We wrote Devontae Parker off for dead every year after year after year and said, don't do it. He can't. He's not, And last year, Devontae Parker puts it all together for a year, comes back from the dead, looks like, and he isn't having a great year. I mean, he's 60%. That's respectable. He's a wide receiver 3. So, I mean, and that's what I would expect out of him.
I would say he's overperformed from the draft capital you invested in Devontae Parker.
Well, Yeah, you
He was
didn't
being
have to.
taken in the
Right.
7th and 8th rounds of
Right.
drafts.
Right. Because nobody believed he could do it again.
Yeah,
Nobody.
nobody wanted to invest in this guy.
So, like I said, here's Corey Davis, definitely on the verge of winning the first annual, second annual Devontae Parker Memorial Award. Um, and I think I'm going to do it every year because I think that's what we're looking for is that guy that, who can we give up? Who's going to be next year's guy we're going to give up on? We're like, you know what? Every year we just want this guy to break out, and he's just not doing it. And I don't know who that's going to be heading into next year or from this year or whatever. Maybe it's Darius Slayton. Maybe it's Christian. Oh, Christian
No,
Kirk.
don't be putting Slayton. It's way too early. Slayton has
Okay.
not been
Let's put
a
Christian
perennial.
Kirk. Christian Kirk will be our next year guy. That's another guy every
Kirk's been
year.
good. You can't be. Kirk has been
What?
pretty good this year.
He's he's 44% consistent. Yes, he is. All right, he is in total points in the top 36, but still 44% consistency isn't getting it done. I mean, Devontae Parker used to score points, but he never would put any consistency together. So maybe Kirk will be our next year guy that will.
But Kirk was 0 for 3 the first 3 weeks, and since then he's been
Okay.
10 fantasy points, 12, 22, 20, 25, 6, 9.
All right.
6
Well,
and 9 aren't
there we go.
great. Those didn't make the threshold, but six
Maybe
targets, 6 targets.
Kirk.
He's coming around.
He's coming around. So see, maybe we can look at that, and we'll go into next year and go. Christian Kirk is going to be the Devontae Parker Memorial winner this year. Make sure you pick him as your wide receiver 3, so you have him. Anyway, so
No,
good
it's
stuff,
people got to be burned more than that. You got to be talking like N'Keal Harry or something like that.
Yeah,
Next year you'll be like, "What? N'Keal Harry broke out? What the heck are you talking about?"
Yeah. No, like you said, well, and there's guys
That's
like
not a N'Keal Harry.
Mike Williams is another guy that every year everybody wants to believe is going to break out from under Keenan Allen and never seems to either. So we'll see.
Weird. Like you could almost argue he has this year, but you could just as easily argue he hasn't. Because again, he had a couple injuries.
Right.
It's just the consistency, but
Right.
he's booming for sure this year with Justin Herbert. He just needs to.
Well, and I think
We can trust him. We
I
still
can see
can't
the
trust him.
progress. Once they spend a year together. I mean, Keenan Allen's a seasoned veteran. He knows, he knows what he's doing. He's done this many times with people. I feel like Mike Williams, if he continues to grow at the end of this year, that's definitely a guy that I think with Herbert will move forward very well. But Williams is in his 5th year now. I mean, he's not. He's still quote young, but he's not 22 either. 23. So. All right, let's move on to the tight end position. Unless you got some more at wide receiver, the man, the legend, continues just to ramp, roll forward. He's now 56 points ahead of Darren Waller, who's still looking good. Looked good the other night against Kansas City. Sorry, I had to swallow because it's starting to dry out.
Yeah, don't forget to breathe there, Bob. That's an important
It's not
part
the
of the
breathing.
process.
The breathing's all involuntary or all voluntary anyway at this point because my nose is all stuffed. Darren Waller, nice, really great night the other night. Just looks so good. I'm always shocked when he's only 70% consistent. It's like, how does he not earn a clutch game every day? Because he's always wide open. He's burning every linebacker. They move him around so much. He's second in total points. Definitely won't be ahead of Kittle next year, but he will definitely be the number 3 guy on the list, probably on everybody's list next year. Anybody in there that, seems to be kind of moving slowly up or kind of, making, other than Hawkinson being the big surprise at 90%, looking good, from your perspective?
Yeah, 9 out of 10 for Hawkinson. That's great. He's been reliable. He's been one of the few guys who hasn't given their owners headaches this year.
Yeah,
because
right.
just about everyone other than Waller, Kelsey, and Hawkinson is giving you a headache at one point or another this year. But guys who are trending up to me, I think it's got to be a guy who I was talking about a little bit earlier in the week, and that's Hunter Henry.
Right.
It goes back to the Justin Herbert effect, right? Like,
right.
Grab anything attached to Justin Herbert, anything you can. Mike Williams, right. Hunter Henry, Kalen Ballage, like we were grabbing onto Josh Kelly at one point. Like anything that is remotely close to Justin Herbert is in a good situation. And Hunter Henry is no scrub. He is no scrub whatsoever. He was drafted 35th overall, came into the league highly regarded. It's always been health. Right. It's always been health related, right. Hunter Henry, and he's been healthy this year. He has not had a single ceiling game this year. He hasn't gone above 15 fantasy points in a single game. But
Right.
that floor has been consistent. And I think this year more than anything, it's probably the floor guys who are a lot more valuable than the booms because you don't know
Hmm.
when the booms are coming. You don't know
Right.
which guy to start, and it's hard capturing those booms. So having these guys who have that floor and you can just plug in and get the consistent points every single week. In Hunter Henry, he has 4 targets in every single game this year. He has 4+ receptions in 8 out of 10. And the problem was early in the year, he was just getting the touchdown sniped. Through the first
Right.
half of the season, through 8 games, he had 1 touchdown.
Right.
Donald Parham and Virgil Green, they had 3. He gave
Right.
those 3 touchdowns to Hunter Henry. People would have been thrilled.
Right. He'd be in
They'd
the
be
top five,
thrilled.
right?
Yeah, they'd be thrilled about what they've gotten out of him right now. But because those were stolen by Virgil Green
Right.
and Donald Parham, he's kind of flew under the radar. Had a little bit of a dip in the middle of the season against Jacksonville, Denver, Las Vegas. Didn't go above 7.3 points in any of those games. But he's had a touchdown each of the past 2 weeks. You know, you got to assume eventually he's going to capture more of those touchdowns than the 75% of them that were going to Parham and Green before. So,
Sure.
and then he's got Atlanta week 14. So Las
Oh, right.
Vegas
Yeah.
15, Denver 16. He's got a good playoff schedule. He's a buy all around in every format. Your trade deadline's probably passed, but in dynasty formats, if you can still get him, this probably the lowest his price is going to be at over the next few years. So if you want him,
Yeah.
now's the time to get him.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. So I don't want to end on a bad note, but let's talk about your Baltimore boy. Number 3 in total points. He was a high draft pick for everybody, but 50% consistency, just brutal. Is it just, hey, that's just the way Baltimore's been because every rest, that's the way Lamar Jackson is? What is different with Mark Andrews? Is it just the offense that we talked about earlier, or is there something else with Andrews that's not getting him the ball consistently enough?
Well, you don't want to end on bad news. That's a good thing because it's no longer bad news for Mark
Okay, good,
Andrews, right? Like
good.
it's good news. 7 for 61 against New England 2 weeks ago, 5 for 96 and a touchdown against Tennessee. He got back in the end zone. He was on a
Right,
4 game drought, hadn't been in the end zone since week 5 against Cincinnati. And
right.
he needed to smell the end zone again. And it's good. He hasn't performed well against Pittsburgh in the past.
Right.
So I'm not thrilled about this Thanksgiving Day matchup, but he's in your starting lineup. You don't have a choice. And crazy things have happened on Thanksgiving, so who knows? Maybe he gets another touchdown. So especially with the running backs out, we're gonna need him to have a good game. But
Right.
after that, it's smooth sailing. It's Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville, and the Giants. The last 4 games of the fantasy season. So
Perfect.
it's
Yeah.
it's all good news for Mark Andrews heading on out.
I figured you could twist that into some good news. All right.
I do that a lot with my Ravens. I got to find ways to keep it
Yeah,
positive.
well, I've been a Browns fan. I've kind of gave up after a while, but hey, they're looking good this year. They're not winning pretty, but a win's a win. We'll take it.
What's your
Um,
prediction for the season finish? Where do they end?
I mean, what they're 7-3 now, right? Or 7-3, 8-3. Um, 7-3, right? Jeez, see how much I can see. This is why I don't pay attention to my own team. All right, I gotta look. Are they 7-3? Are they
7-3. Yep, they're seven and
okay?
three.
They're 7-3. I
Above my
mean,
Ravens at 6-4. Ouch.
yeah, well, I that was the kind of thing that kind of shined this past week when I heard we moved ahead with the Ravens in the
Whew.
division. Um,
When was the
I
last time
mean,
that happened?
yeah, it's been a long time. Probably I don't know. Maybe there was a year we made the playoffs with some scab quarterback. I can't remember who it was.
So you're
Anyway,
expecting a playoff appearance this year, I
I
assume.
am expecting a playoff appearance. Yes. They're gonna lose to Baltimore. Let's see what they got left. So they got Tennessee this week. Or they're at Tennessee. That could be troublesome. We'll see. I don't know. They seem to do pretty well against running teams, so they might be able to shut them down. It's gonna be a slugfest. I think a lot of it's going to depend on weather. The Baltimore game, I got to say that's going to be a loss. I feel like Baltimore is going to start, kicking it up a notch, realizing they're behind. So if they can beat Tennessee,
And
They'll
they got
lose.
Jacksonville first this week, so that should be a
Oh,
win.
that's right. I'm sorry. We got Jacksonville, so we assume that's a win. Tennessee, we hope for a win, so that would make them 9-3. That would be shocking. They're going to blow
Either
one of
way,
those.
even if you say they lose to Tennessee and
Let's say they
Baltimore,
lose Tennessee.
beat
So now they're
Jacksonville.
all right. So now they're 8-4. Baltimore they lose, they go to 8-5, but then they have the Giants and the Jets back to back.
So at least
So
9-7.
right. So now you're 9-7. Yeah, I got to believe 9-7. They probably, lose to Pittsburgh at home, but you never know if Pittsburgh has clinched. I mean, remember they're undefeated. If they have a first round bye,
You think Pittsburgh will play for the undefeated? You think they'll rest their starters?
well, that'll be the thing. So if Pittsburgh loses, which of course if they loses, then Kansas City's 9-1. I think a lot of it will depend on where they're at. It could be also one of those things where, let's say that they're 15, they're 14-2, Kansas City's 15-1. They can't move up or move down. I could see them saving guys like Ben and some of those guys for the playoffs. I mean,
to me though, I could be wrong.
I don't know.
Mike Tomlin just seems like the kind of guy who
Probably
would leave it up to his players.
Right.
And I feel like the players would want to play for the perfect season. So it makes me think they would play.
Yeah, if it's for a perfect season, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to turn that down, but and like I said, I mean, they certainly have the potential to do it. Who they got? They got Baltimore. I think
the odds are against them. The odds are against them.
They got Baltimore. I mean, at Buffalo could be
I really
tough.
hope Baltimore gets the win. We need this win this week.
Right. Even Indy's not a pushover.
Yeah.
I mean, Indy's got a tough defense. They can bring a lot of pressure on Big Ben. So we'll see. I mean, I don't think they're going undefeated. That's, to me, it's pretty damn close to impossible, but you never know. I mean, they had an easy schedule because last year they sucked because of Ben being out all year. So, they've had some nice bonuses there, but in the same way with the Browns. I mean, playing teams like the Giants and the Jets and, Jacksonville and some of these, that helps a lot. And where the Ravens had a first place schedule. So, that's the way it goes. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I like to see all three. I'd like to see all three of the teams make the playoffs. That would be fun.
It's looking like it's quite possible.
Certainly quite possible. Yeah, definitely. So, all right. Well, David, thanks again for being on here and joining us. Why don't you tell everybody about your article that's up there right now, what else you're doing, and where they can find you.
Yeah, I think my pitch, if you want to check out the article, is basically it's just some more Jalen Hurts propaganda, which I've been pumping out consistently the past couple of days. So if you want to check it out, get in your Jalen Hurts hype mood, I can help you out with that. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, the username is @GuruFantasyWorld, no O in World, WRLD.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, David, for being here as always. And everybody, you can find me, of course, Bob_Lung on Twitter and at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. For all the articles, we'll certainly have all the Week 11 reviews up this week. And, of course, this weekend, Consistently Cashing will be coming your way with Colby and Ron, as well as our prop bet consistency report and podcast this weekend. Ron, those guys killed it this week. I think they won both their FanDuels and DraftKings. So great week for them. So make sure you follow them and win some cash. So everybody else, have a great Thanksgiving. Give lots of thanks. Stay safe. Don't catch COVID like I did. Everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Take care. God bless. We're out.